I've told this story before, I won't bore anyone, but I found out, about
that's what this podcast's all about, Neil.
well, seeing as you've said that, Steve, so the year was...
Hi, this is Steve, aka @AllAnthar on Twitter, and here are some more of my gaming vexes. Hello, and welcome to another episode of My Gaming Vexes. This time, the Fellowship got together to talk about gaming in Middle-earth. As you'll hear, I've always had a deep love of Professor Tolkien's work, and it was the sheer scale of his act of secondary creation that played a large part in my beginning gaming in the first place. Yes, the writing can be leaden and pompous in places, and there's always Bombadil Gate to keep the flames of controversy alive. But behind it all, there's a sense of wonder and mystery that keeps me coming back for more. A couple of years ago, a group of us got together for a gaming weekend that became known as the One Ring Road Trip. It was an amazing experience to really immerse ourselves in Middle-earth through the lens of Cubicle 7's The One Ring, a great game that repays the effort of navigating its idiosyncratic editing. It's this group that got together on this episode to delve into the topic of gaming in Middle-earth. And when I say delve, I mean we really bang on about it for quite some time, so much so that we ran the risk of waking some dark Balrog in the uttermost depths through our pontificating. So, for those of you who aren't such fans of Tolkien, it's up to you whether you put up with us blathering on or not. To be honest, this episode was always going to happen, much like the inevitable RuneQuest episode that will be along in due course. Be warned, that episode will probably have Doc Cowie on it too. With regard to the future, the next episode will focus on Old Scouser Role-Playing's excellent Night's Dark Terror campaign that we've been playing for the best part of 18 months or so. Neil's been running two different groups with the same scenario, so as well as getting into a discussion of OSE overall, we'll also touch on the pleasures and pitfalls of running a game like this. The episodes following that are a little more uncertain. For depressing real-life reasons, I've had to put all of my GMing activities on hold for the foreseeable future, so reflections on actual games played may become scarce. However, we're a year into the podcast now, and the feedback I do get is kind enough to make me want to carry on, although it may not be as regular as it has been up to now. The whole purpose of this podcast is to share my gaming group's reflections about what we're playing, and hopefully to encourage you to try some of these games if you haven't already. More, I'd like you to feel that you're part of our group too, sometimes nodding your head sagely in agreement, or perhaps snorting in disgust at some of our more ridiculous assertions. If the last year has taught me anything, it's that we need to feel connected to others who share our enthusiasms. So if you agree or disagree with anything you hear, please feel free to drop me a message via Anchor or via Twitter. If by some chance you like what you've heard, a positive review via your podcast app of choice will be very welcome too. So, on with the episode.
So I picturing us sitting in the Green Dragon Inn, our curly-toed feet up on the benches, with a jug of well-brewed ale in our hands, and perhaps a few bowls of pipeweed being passed around. So if you want to introduce yourselves.
Yeah, so Graham Kinniber, obviously, I'm not on Twitter. I don't do the twits, but I do Discord and a few gaming forums, and you'll find me as Kenny Graham on those.
I'm Joe. You can find me on Twitter under oilpainting71.
I'm Neil Benson, also known as Old Scouser RPing on Twitter, also known as the Dodgy Scouser by someone in the current company here, and probably other people as well.
Yeah, I'm Rick Knott, at Lintillers with the Z on Twitter.
So I've been really looking forward to this, actually, to having a conversation about gaming in Middle-earth. All of us here, we obviously went off on the hashtag One Ring Road Trip 2 years ago.
Yeah.
2 years ago. And I think we all agree that was certainly one of the gaming highlights of the last couple of years. It was a fantastic time. And it wasn't just about the people. Obviously, we're all great guys.
Of course we are.
But it was also about the opportunity to play a game in Middle-earth and to really sort of try and sort of immerse ourselves in that. So, what I'd like to do really is to perhaps just touch on how we first came to Tolkien. What was our first experience of gaming in Middle-earth?
Well, I could go first because my experience will probably be a bit more limited than you guys. So I'm quite a casual sort of Tolkien enthusiast, really. But I love it. So yeah, I mean, I got introduced to Tolkien through reading The Hobbit when I was about 9, but I didn't game until in Middle-earth until with you guys, really. So that was 2 years ago. I'd looked at MERP before, but I'd never. I always thought it was I couldn't ever see myself sort of finding a way into playing in that game world. So not until Tor anyway.
+1 for The Hobbit with me. Bought it. I remember I bought it by my mum on holiday on the basis I was roaring through all the Terrance Dicks Doctor Who adaptations at a ridiculous rate, and she bought it for me and said this should slow you down a bit. She was so wrong. It actually sped it up. But yeah, same kind of thing. 9 years old.
Do you jump into Lord of the Rings after that, or is there a bit of a separation?
I don't know. I think there might have been a bit of a separation, but I don't know, maybe about a year or something like that. Then bang, straight into that, and it was the big hardbacks out of the library with the proper maps at the end. Yeah, and I remember having to order The Return of the King, and that was a long week. That really was. Oh dear. But yeah, loved it from the start. Loved it. First introduction to the to gaming in Middle was probably MERP. I had it, was desperate to play it more, but really couldn't manage to get my friends to play it a great deal. But which I could not understand, well, still don't. But yeah, it was MERP for me as well.
So I was older than you guys. I think I was about 16 or 17. And the start of my love of Tolkien is inextricably linked to my start with RPGs as well. The two go hand in hand. I'd seen Bakshi's Lord of the Rings, and it was just mind blown. It was my brother who was into the military modelling. He had all these magazines, and he said, there's this game I've heard of called Dungeons and Dragons, which is supposed to be like the Lord of the Rings. So I went into Games of Liverpool, and that was really how I got into games. But when I read the book, I started with The Two Towers because in my mind I'd seen the film which covered like the Fellowship, so I could skip ahead because I wanted to find out what happened. So I read The Two Towers and Return of the King, and just loved it. The Hobbit, probably after Lord of the Rings. I got the Silmarillion probably in my late teens, probably not long after that. But found it quite hard going, and much to my shame, I've still not made it all the way through.
Yeah, this would be. I hesitate to name the year, but I was probably last year of primary school, maybe, or roundabout. But yeah, it was a fellow classmate had The Hobbit, and I still remember to this day, like, what really attracted me to this. What I was curious about this book he was reading, and the maps, the maps at either side, the treasure map of Stray, the treasure map of the Lonely Mountain, and the other map of Mirkwood. That just really attracted me right away. So I went out and persuaded my parents to buy me The Hobbit. Still remember reading the bit that really sold me was when all the dwarves are singing about gold and the adventures just in the offing, and that moment of something exciting happening, that just really hooked me. So went straight through The Hobbit, devoured The Hobbit, and then persuaded my parents to, and they were quite reticent about the fact that I wanted to buy the trilogy next, which was in 3 paperbacks, and they weren't convinced I was going to make my way through it. But So I did. So that was my mate Chris. He became my best mate, and we bonded over a love of Tolkien. Been friends ever since. He was my first ever DM when we got around to D&D. And as regards gaming in Middle Earth, so we got into D&D right away. But the first sort of thing that came out was just to back up, we joined a Tolkien Society. We used to go to Tolkien Society weekends in various parts of the country. There was a sort of junior Tolkien Society branch which met in York. We went to that and we did some role playing down there, just D&D. And we used to go to Oxford for Oxford, so we were hardcore Tolkien nerds. So and the two became maybe about a circle of about 4 or 5 of us who were really into Tolkien. And the first thing I came out is I've googled this because I couldn't remember the exact title, but the first thing that came out was Iron Crown got some kind of Tolkien license. And they produced a slim volume called A Campaign and Adventure Guidebook for Middle-earth. So that was like systemless, or else it maybe covered a couple of systems, but this was before they even had MERP. And we used that we used AD&D to play games in Middle-earth. So we were always on the lookout for a game set in Middle-earth quite early on. And you could definitely question whether AD&D was the right fit for rules, but we tried to make it work, and some of it worked, and some of it was like completely gonzo and came up with sort of crazy situations. But we were eager from the start.
I mean, we'll touch on a bit more about how different systems, and we're not going to go in a forensic analysis, but just our sort of views on it, really. Yeah. I mean, for me, my first experience with Tolkien was like at primary school when our teacher was sort of reading the story to us, the Hobbit, and I really wasn't bothered by the story. But what I loved was the artwork, the green, black and white artwork on the cover. In fact, I've got.
I can see it over your shoulder.
Great podcasting. Yeah. I've got it on the wall behind me. You can't. No one else can see that. But anyway, it's there. But that really took me in. I think it was the maps really. Like Neil, went to the local library and sort of started reading Lord of the Rings. I remember when I was about 12, and I just read them. I just got into the Fellowship of the Ring, 2 Towers. I was skipping through the Hobbit chapters to get to the Orc bits because that was the interesting bit. But the whole thing absolutely captivated me, and I was fascinated by the script and the languages and all. Just that completely brought me in. And then when I got into gaming, it was through adventure game books. But again, like Graham, I was looking for a way to experience the world of Tolkien. There was just something about it. And I've done, read lots of other books and fantasy novels after the Lord of the Rings, etc. But nothing quite drew me in like Tolkien. I think there's probably a million PhD theses out there about what it is, what are the key features about Tolkien. I mean, what do we think the key features are for any game? What are the must-haves for a game that's going to depict Middle-earth? What does it have to be a Middle-earth game, do we think?
It's got to have a corruption mechanic. That's what it really needs, and I think that's where MERP falls down. If it had something like that, then it would really work very, very well. But I think it's quite noticeable. I know we're going to talk about AIME and the one later, but both of those have got a corruption mechanic, and I think that's really, really important because it, first of all, it kind of guides the players away from being murder hobos. So that's a really important thing. So most of them will actually do that because that's the big thing, the difference between D&D and sort of adventuring in Middle-earth. And the second thing is that means that you can have so much fun. If you actually start getting corrupted for that kind of thing, then you can have fun actually role-playing that as well. But I think that's what I'd definitely say. Some kind of mechanic to simulate corruption, either what happens at Boromir or what happens to Aragorn.
Yeah, I would take up Rick's point there, corruption, but also showing the duality of the good and the evil in the stories. And I think certainly Tor does that with it. With you look at the pools, the hope pools for the good guys and the hate pools for the bad guys, and you immediately get that kind of immersion and that sense of what the game is about, and I think that's a pretty strong, that thematic thing to necessity really to use in a game about Tolkien.
I mean, it's got to have all the stuff like hobbits and rings.
Yeah, it needs the world.
Yeah,
doesn't it? It needs to bring the world information.
And I think it needs to do it in a way that it fits in with the books, particularly Lord of the Rings. I mean, arguably, there are different things really. There's the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit, which are kind of quite specific quest-driven things, and then there's the wider Middle Earth as well, isn't there? Which spans over thousands of years, and that is I don't know whether that would. If you were to build a Middle Earth game that could be played across any age, anywhere, whether it would look quite the same as a Lord of the Rings game. I don't know.
I mean, obviously there's a difference in Hobbit, which is a children's book, and then Lord of the Rings, which is intended for a more adult audience, more grown-up audience, whatever. But then you've got things like Silmarillion, and essentially you've got, characters in that which is superheroes. Really, they're just levels of power far beyond certainly that you'd probably find in Lord of the Rings. And I think there's not a commercially available game that sort of, I don't think, looks at first and second age, but heroes. But I don't know. We'll maybe come to that. Neil, Graham, sorry. What about for you? When you were searching through those games, what was it that you were looking for? What experience did you want to get out of it?
Well, I'm going to invoke a term which, to me, I've heard it used quite judgmentally, and I think it's a bit Middle Earth tourism. I mean, people sniff at that term. I've heard it used, and I suppose it applies to any sort of licensed property. But for me, that's what completely sells a game. So, I can have any fantasy game experience I want, but if I want to play in a game in Middle Earth, I want a chance to visit Weathertop. I want a chance to go through Moria. I want to explore Mirkwood. I want. So it's a balancing act between having something that feels fresh and gives the players kind of control, but I do want an approximation of the experiences that happen in the books. I don't want to do a political intrigue game set in Middle Earth. It's not about. Now you could argue that try and save Denethor from going mad. That you could pause at a game where you're courtiers in Minas Tirith, and okay, if you've played the hell out of a Middle Earth setting, you might want to go down that route eventually. But that's not my first port of call. I want to sort of do similar adventures, similar experiences to what the characters go through in the books. They need to be different enough to be exciting for the players, so they're not just repeating the footsteps of the books by rote, but they need to be close enough to give you that experience.
It's about the peoples, so it's interacting with those cultures. So the Rohirrim are sort of brave and impetuous and that sort of thing, and then you've got the elves who are otherworldly, and essentially their concerns are quite different to yours. You've got the men of Gondor, etc. So you've got that, and then you've got the places. So actually going to just going into the prancing pony and having that experience because you've read about it and you want to, through the game, you want to be there or have that experience of going there. But I think also it's the feelings as well, or the concept. So we talked about things like corruption and hope, and not being murder hobos. I think that violence is something that it happens, but it's never the primary reason for an encounter or a game, and there's always other ways out of it. But I think also when heroes, when they do fall, it's tragedy. It's not funny, it's not like when you're playing Star Wars and you go, I want to fall to the dark side, so it's a kind of cool dark Jedi powers. It's this character is striven to do a certain thing. They try to live in a certain way, and then and I think if you can, it sounds really pretentious, but that when I play a game, that's what I want. I want to see characters that they do fall, and it's seen as sort of actually it's a shame rather than a
I think it's
something
it
to
is
be
a serious thing, isn't it? I mean, I think with if you take D&D, or Star Wars or whatever, other RPGs, you can have a like humor and almost like, well, I don't want to say it's like imply Middle Earth is miserable, but you can kind of have that kind of self-effacing kind of humor and silliness and gonzo and all that kind of stuff. Whereas in Middle Earth, there's no room for that, really. It is, it's a game that is where verisimilitude is really important.
It doesn't mean you're not having fun when you're playing the game. When we were playing, last night, and some of the games that we're playing, so we're playing through the Oaths of the Riddermark, the Rohirrim campaign, and like any other game that we play, it's great fun. But I think maybe because we're just completely bought into the whole Middle Earth thing, that it has perhaps a different resonance for us.
I mean, I'm saying that like it's a good thing. You know that the fact that it's serious and it's deep and it has that verisimilitude. It feels like real, and it's not things aren't trivial, and we do have a laugh playing it. Of course we do. That I don't mean as a game that there's no room for that. But I think a Middle Earth game has to feel that way, and consequences. Actions matter and words matter. All those kind of things are really important for that feeling in Middle Earth.
Yeah. So having something. So if the game's able to at least partially model, or has got a mechanism to enable that's pretty important. And I know, on another podcast, sort of Frankenstein's RPG, you were talking there about the sort of social mechanisms within that, and I think we talked about obviously being able to journey across the lands and to be able to have those social interactions and the combat and that sort of thing. So all those things together, obviously we're going to talk about the One Ring later on, because of course we are. But I think any sort of system that is going to try and replicate that, or at least give that experience, that taste of the Middle Earth that we read about and that we all love, it has to have those things in there.
I mean, I think if you want an answer, go and open the One Ring and look in that. That'll tell you.
Yeah.
It's the whole immersion, really, of it's such a rich world, isn't it? And the cultures are rich. You can sort of really grasp them if you've read, the Lord of the Rings or the Hobbits, and it's very easy to buy into that world. And that's what I found. That it's been very easy to get that real deep level of immersion. Particularly in the Rohirrim game that we're playing at the minute. I've lost a character tragically, and it was quite a moment actually. I tried to laugh it off, but there were private, there were tears.
There was a small tear in the corner of your eye. That's right. So, I mean, we've all touched on MERP. Did that feel like it was a Lord of the Rings type experience for us? Where do we think it falls down? Where do we think it stands up?
I think the first important decision that MERP made, perhaps, was in allowing player characters to use magic, and you had magic using characters, which Tor interestingly steers clear of. MERP was excellent at some things, and some of the support material they put out was fantastic, but they elected to use a magic system, and it wasn't even a magic system that was closely found in Tolkien. It was more something that you would find in a kind of standard fantasy role-playing game. So it was imported from the Rolemaster system, and the Rolemaster was a generic fantasy game, which was more about a different way of doing a kind of D&D experience, and that kind of bled in. So, I mean, I played, like when MERP came along, we were like, okay, this is it. This is the Middle Earth role-playing game. And we went with that, and, we grabbed it with both hands, and we milked it for all it was worth. Had a load of fun, but would I look back on it and say, I think as you get a bit older, you assess your games more. And would say it replicated the Tolkien experience that we wanted. Sometimes it did. Sometimes it was just knockabout fun with literal wizards casting fireballs left and centre, and the GM tried. But we we had moments which approximated what we felt we read in the books, and other ones which were much more standard D&D type.
But I'll argue that was probably more about just the way that you approach the game, because as you said, the mechanics. I think there might be a corruption mechanic in there, but I don't think it was. Certainly, when I played in the past, it wasn't widely used. So I think it was certainly optional rather than being sort of integral to the game.
I think it was a second edition of Merp, which I never really got to clap eyes on. So we played the first edition, and just so I don't remember a corruption mechanic in first edition Merp.
I played there. I'm playing it now actually, and of course there was the game that you ran at Grogmeet 2019, I believe, which was excellent. It felt very Middle Earth. Battle of the Pelennor Fields. It was very good. And yeah, you were in that, weren't you, Rick? That's right.
Yeah, I was. I remember. Actually, finally working out that you need to. We needed to blow something up, and it may be jumping the gun a bit. But I remember at the end, Steve jumping up behind his custom GM screen, and finally after it finished, putting his hand on his head and saying, "Shittest system ever."
Yeah, not far wrong. I think Dave. Bagpuss Grognard, I think he's having the same experience now, and it's for you guys online. I just looked at the corruption mechanic actually, and it's all around magic. So essentially, if you have spell failures in MERP, then but it's suggested rather than being an integral part of the game. Yeah. So I think you're right. I think a lot of the materials that came out for MERP, I mean, were fantastic in the depth, and some of the artwork particularly was really evocative. But again, it was not a byproduct, but I think the system, the game itself didn't help it particularly. The other game that I picked up on early was the Decipher Lord of the Rings game. I don't know if any of you guys came across that. So it was tied into the films, and it was quite good actually. It came, so it would be sort of 2002, etc. And they brought out quite a few hardbacks, quite nice. A lot of film artwork, etc. In that, again, there was. Corruption wasn't a big thing. It was very traditional in its approach, but I think what it did do was it made elves so much better than men, and dwarves. They were just far. If you were a power gamer, you would never choose anything except an elf. And I think that was quite good actually. Quite, I don't know, it was brave on part of the designers, because in the literature they are better in every way. They are essentially perfect. But again, it's one of those ones where I bought all the stuff. They brought out a Moria box set, and it all sat on the shelf, and then it went in the purge, and I never actually ever played it. But I think that was one of the ones. It periodically comes up on eBay, and it's one of those ones I keep thinking I should pick it up. But I know, again, spoilers, but I would just default back to the One Ring anyway, so it would just sit on my shelf as a nice thing. The next one I've got is Adventures in Middle Earth, and I know, Rick, this is your specialist subject, so
right.
Do you want to tell us about that one?
Basically, this could actually be my favourite game ever, which is a weird thing to say, but
wow,
it's often like the poor cousin of the One Ring. It's the 5th edition of the 5th edition D&D version of the One Ring. I love it for its sheer perversity. It takes all the advantages you could have. Everyone who goes for it initially will think, great, it's 5th edition, it's in Middle Earth, and it systematically takes away all the things, all the assumptions that 5th edition players would have that makes them want to play it in the first place. Want to go through the goblins' pockets? They haven't got magic. They haven't got coins. Why would they want it? Obviously, just go around killing orcs in a righteous way. No, there's actually a corruption mechanic, which means if you do things like that, then you start to turn evil. It's absolutely. I love it. Its conviction and its perverse nature of absolutely stomping over all the things that should be the advantages. I mean, it's God bless it for
Yeah.
that.
So does it replicate a lot of the mechanics, or all the mechanics that you see in a game like the One Ring, for example? So you talked about corruption.
Yeah.
Does it have hope?
It's got the corruption mechanic. It doesn't really have a hope one. What it does do, it's got all kinds. It's got quite a complex system of bonuses for various things that characters can do. I mean, I must remember in the one that I ran based in the Second Age, Neil's character had a raft of different abilities related to tracking things. In the end, I just took some of them out because they were so sort of complementary. But so that's the way it does that kind of thing. It's lots of little bonuses here and there, but it doesn't have a hope mechanic. It does have corruption. But then, this is Tolkien. He's a miserable author. His main themes are death, the decline, the fall of man, and hope. So 2 out of 3 aren't that cheerful.
What it does have is it plays up the inspiration mechanic of 50 quite a lot, and contextualizes that into Middle Earth. Experiencing a wonderful view. You gain inspiration. So that I suppose that's the translation of hope in the 50 version. I would have thought.
Yeah, you're
closest into it. Yeah.
I mean, the standard implementation of inspiration for is a bit lost, isn't it? It just it's there hanging off the edge, doesn't do very much, and in fact usually gets forgotten. Whereas it sounds like they've found a home for it there. Have any of the rest of us played? I mean, obviously we played Adventures in Middle Earth with you, Rick. What about you, Graham? Have you?
No, I mean,
played it at all?
I think it followed on the heels of Tor, and by that time I was buying / collecting Tor, so tempted though I was, because it had some nice artwork, just different artwork from Tor, just a different style, but also obviously Middle Earth artwork. I was tempted, but I never tried Adventures of Middle Earth. I suppose our my proto version of that was us running a D&D with that booklet away back in the so that was 1982. That booklet came out, and a friend of ours, Eddie, he latched onto that, and we did basically try and run a Middle Earth game with AD&D rules, which again we had fun with, but lots of crazy things happened.
Did that try and replicate or try and bring out some of the themes that we've spoken about beyond just the monsters and the classes?
I only had a player's perspective on it, and I would love to get a hold of that booklet and look through and see what was there versus what our GM presented. But I mean, from reading the description of it, all it was a big map of Middle Earth, and I don't know, it must have given some kind of guidelines, but maybe just kind of standard monsters you'd meet and all that kind of thing. But
it was pretty early in the evolution of RPGs.
It's interesting because it's the first. I mean, Iron Crown obviously they were the big name in Middle Earth role playing, and that was their first. I think that was their first release, and it was before they had a rule set, and before I think they were probably pushing people towards Rolemaster even in that document. But they're saying, look, you can play Middle Earth using D&D. They probably mentioned RuneQuest, and we're probably I'm sure they'd been punting the Rolemaster system and saying, use this to game in Middle Earth. But we had, I mean, to show you an extreme example of how system matters, we had our GM Eddie he's a pretty cunning guy, and he would always try and press you into making bad decisions. And so we had all these trolls closing on us, and we had something because we're using D&D. We had a character who had wish. He had a wish ring or a wish spell, and he pressured them into. So this, and he was younger brother of one of our more regular players, and it was really flapping. And he said, I'm going to wish that all the trolls were 10 miles away. And our GM interpreted that as that every troll in Middle Earth was 10 miles away from us. So the ones who were immediately attacking us buggered off 10 miles down the road to join every other troll. And so he just said, right, all my encounters are going to be trolls now. And we got our asses kicked from every wandering monster encounter table. Yeah. So,
latest troll army.
I could write a book about that GM and then the Middle Earth campaign he subsequently ran once they got hold of Merc, because we went to Oxenmoot, which was a Tolkien Society meeting, and he bought Middle Earth role playing in Oxford. Well, we're at a Tolkien Society meeting. It was like the stars aligned, and we played MERP. We played the hell out of MERP for about a good 6 or 7 years afterwards.
That was the thing, wasn't it? You get a lot. Used to get a lot of longevity out of games.
Exactly,
There weren't that many of them coming out at the time, were they?
So I was just going to say, it'd be interesting to see what Free League do with Adventures in Middle Earth. We kind of know what they're doing with the One Ring.
Yeah.
Whether they will change as much. I mean, do you think there's, Rick and Joe, do you think there's much that would benefit, from being changed in it?
Not really, I wouldn't say.
Yeah, same. I'm not sure really. I mean, they could go the route of trying to emulate more of what's in Tor, I suppose. But do you want to do that in a game? That's why you've got two different games. You don't want to make them too similar, do you? Because they lose their own kind of strengths then. But who knows? Yeah.
But they've got the license, haven't they, to do Adventures in Middle Earth as well? I mean, it's going to be such a cash cow. Why wouldn't you do it? I mean, 75E players, which is, all good. So before we turn to the Mimikill in the Room, which is the One Ring, are there any? Because I know Neil did a bit of digging out of other games that you've come across.
There's a few I've looked at. Not just for this, but I've seen, and there's the Lord of the Rings adventure game, which I think was by Iron Crown, and that came out in the early 90s. And I was listening to a podcast. What was it called? Podcast the other day. Say like a review. It's kind of high level, but basically what they were saying is that it was meant to be an introductory box. Get kids in. Great cover art, but apparently it was to bridge the gap to MERP, but apparently it was nearly just as complex as MERP. And system-wise, I think it had a lot of similarities. But then there's one called Middle Earth Adventure Game, which is based on that, and that's a completely free thing if you just Google Middle Earth Adventure Game, and that looks quite interesting. What else have we got? There's a game called The Age of Shadow, which it's not set in Middle Earth, but the history of the game is that the author wanted to set it during the Second Age, I think it was, and he was advised wisely by our good friend Newt of D101 Games, I believe, to avoid Middle Earth because all the legal intricacies and
the litigious nature of some of the owners of Tolkien Enterprises, let's say, defending their IP, which is entirely appropriate.
Right. And so anyway, the chap made this game, Age of Shadow, very good. You can get it for free in PDF. It's based on OpenQuest. So it's a lot of similarities to RuneQuest, but it's really got quite a nice Tolkien-like flavour. I can't remember whether it's got any corruption mechanic in it, actually. But it's quite like game, and that's quite a nice one.
So, I mean, there's a few options out there, aren't there? And I think, let's just talk about it now. So the One Ring, okay. So, I mean, that's been out. I mean, it's obviously it's going to go into its second edition, having made I think approximately 63 squillion quid on Kickstarter.
We love it.
I mean, I think. we've played quite a bit of the first edition, really, so all the revised edition. So and in fact, the first time we played it was when we went to the One Ring road trip, and Graham fantastically GM'd the whole thing for us and face to face. But that was my first experience of it, and I think. I don't know what your guys' reflections really, not on the game because it was brilliant, but just the system itself when you first come across it. How did it feel when you first got into start to play it? Was it easy to get your head into? Was it a little bit?
I bought it
complex
not long after I got back into role playing after the deep freeze, and I thought it was a beautiful book. I started reading it, and I think got about halfway through, and it just wasn't grabbing me at all, even with the beautiful artwork and there were. Now I've played it, I can see that it's what at the heart of it is a relatively simple system, but it just felt kind of disconnected and bitty, and I think I got to a point where I just thought, that this play this another time. And it was only really when you got to play it that you started to get to grips with the system. And I think particularly since we've been playing it with you, Steve, we've really got a really good feel for the system. And I like it. I think it works really well. It does what it sets out to do. It's different. One of the things we didn't talk about when we're talking about what makes a game, a Middle-earth game or a Lord of the Rings game, two of the big things I think in it are the idea of the journeys and the quest, and also the fellowship phase as well, as big parts of the game. And I think they're nice aspects of it. But I think just the way the system works when you do stuff. I mean, it's just rolling dice, but it has a nice feel to it, and you're and every time you roll a dice, you get the Eye of Sauron or the Gandalf rune, which can be good or bad. You can get a Tengwa symbol on some of the dice, which gives you
great or extraordinary successes. Yeah, I mean, I think for me, I picked up the rule book and like a good lad, I did my revision before it went away on the one room road trip weekend, and I found it quite it's quite mechanistic in some of its approach. So interestingly, I see echoes, similarities, parallels maybe with Forbidden Lands, because whereas Forbidden Lands has got a very mechanical approach to journeys, let's say, okay, and similarly, you get a lot of that within the One Ring. So how it treats it compartmentalizes. You've got your journey. So how you get from one place to the next, and it's pretty. You go through a set of steps to do it, and then likewise in social situations, it's got it's very structured in its approach rather than mechanistic. And combat is designed to be. It's designed to be theatre of the mind. You don't have maps. I mean, I use maps in my games just because it helps to visualize, what's happening. But really, it is very much about choosing the stances. And I think, reading quite a lot of sort of opinions and reviews online, and people bemoaning the fact that I think it's a bit of a gear change from you're going from 5e, which is pretty loosey goosey, or a lot of other games really, and then you hit this one, which is actually. I need to go through steps, and it doesn't mean you can't role play within that, but I think that framework is quite well defined, and I think it's about, for me, that's what keeps the Tolkien in, rather than letting it out. I don't know, and I think there's a learning curve you have to go through to get into it.
Definitely learning curve. I would say the game itself probably doesn't do itself any favours in terms of the way it's laid out. I mean, I got the first edition or the first version, which was a slipcase set, and people were raving about it. Also, people with more patience than I could see that it was a very good Tolkien game underneath the way it was presented. But when I completely bounced off it first time, and I sort of it sat on my shelves. I thought, okay, that was a bit disappointing. Then I read that the revised hardback was coming out, and that was going to, and it did improve the layout and made it more comprehensible. Still not perfect, but I got to the stage with that. I got to the stage with that where I could at least, after applying myself to it, I thought, right, I'm confident I'm going to do this gaming weekend. I'm confident of being able to run the game. But it was only when we actually got to play it and we actually got to see how it worked, and I felt, and it was actually a rush, I would say. It was I thought I was really pleasantly surprised at how well it worked out in the end, that game. And just stuff you did help, because you kind of got up to combat cards, and that kind of gave us all the little sort of combat options. And I think even without giving away a scenario spoiler, there was a climatic combat at the end of the scenario. Or no, it was about halfway. There was a big beast to confront. The troll, the troll.
It's a massive bloody troll.
And that felt like an epic fight, and all the little sub mechanisms within combat really worked for that fight. And and it really enhanced the theatre of the mind, I think. I was really, really pleased with how it turned out. And it was only after coming away from running that weekend I felt as if I really sort of got to the nuts and bolts of the system, with the exception of I didn't really get to try any kind of the social encounter mechanic, which is described as one of the third pillars of the 3 pillars of the game, and that's the third pillar. Didn't really get into a situation which really warranted that, just due to the nature of the scenario. So and apparently one of the things they say about Adventures of Middle-earth is that Adventures of Middle-earth supposedly improves upon the travel.
It's a lot simpler.
Over Tor. So perhaps they'll take a leaf out of that book for the second bit.
I mean, the travel didn't feel too tricky the way you've been running it, Steve.
Well, it's a very helpful web page, the One Ring Travel Calculator. So although there's a lot of rules and crunch to it, actually it's fairly simple. And in reality, they spend a lot of time talking about things like hazards. So for listeners there at home, essentially, with the mechanism in the One Ring is you have a feat die. So that's 12-sided dice, and then one of the faces is a Eye of Sauron, which is bad, and then you've got a Gandalf, which is good, and then you have a number of success die, which is D6s. So basically, the travel rules, that a lot of the complexity that's articulated in the book itself talks about when you have hazards. In practice, it rarely happens, So really, you could actually simplify it down even more. And I think, as you say, the way the book's laid out now, that the revised first edition, it doesn't do itself any favors. You can tell there's an enthusiasm there. They're trying to get this fantastic stuff across. But I think it sort of trips itself up in some ways. Reference the fact that even though we've been playing it every 2 weeks for months, we still have to go back and look at different parts of the rules to try and find things. So so it's interesting.
I picked up Adventures in Middle-earth first, actually, and then I got curious, and I also picked up the Tor, the revised rule book, and I read it through. Loved Adventures in Middle-earth, and then I read this through, and I just thought, oh wow, this is incredibly immersive, and all the mechanics seem to fit together. And for me, when I was reading it through, I can get that some of the editing maybe it's a little bit disjointed to follow. As a games master, it's a bit tricky flipping through, but the concepts are sort of and the artwork as well. It was all sort of jumping off the page for me, and I think I remember raving about it on Twitter, and I think Graham latched onto that, and then that's how I got into the One Ring road trip as well. I think I was invited in.
Got invited into the inner circle.
The combats and everything. I could just see how it could sort of work. I love the dice pool mechanic because I hadn't played with dice pools before. I'd played mostly stuff like Woofrup and RuneQuest and D&D, so that was new, and it just all sort of gelled really nicely. And I could see how it could be, combat could be quite an ordeal, appropriately so as well, nothing to be sort of taken lightly, but there are lots of colourful options in there which brought the sort of the Tolkien text alive, like, when you get weary and you get weary, what's the rule for getting weary? So
if your endurance drops below your fatigue level, you become weary, and you can get fatigue by travelling. So actually, there's a cost to travel. It's not just about how long it takes to get there; it's whether you get there tired.
It all links together so well. The journeys, the combat, and this social encounter. But like the little colourful touches, like you're in the middle of a battle and you're weary. What can you do to help yourself? Take your helm off. There's sort of heroic taking your helm off to do your last stand, and you get a little bit of fight back, perhaps. And maybe you might win the day, maybe you won't. But there's just there's a hell of a lot to like about it. I have to say, it's just rich. It's a really rich game.
Yeah, I think combat is dangerous in the game. I think everybody always feels threatened. Even when you're perhaps just against a few bandits, it can go the wrong way. And if you haven't got the initiative going to combat and your opponent's first, it can all go very badly wrong very quickly.
As we found out last night.
We're all about to die.
It hasn't gone wrong yet. I think the fact that you don't want to rush into combat. I mean, I don't know what it's like in Adventures in Middle Earth, but certainly in the One Ring, a more of a murder hope approach. You will,
I mean, with the Adventures in Middle Earth, absolutely lethal. It's the one version of 5th edition I've seen where it's really quite nasty. You've got a wolf. You get 2 or 3 of those, you've got just a decent sized party. Could be in a bit of trouble. And I've seen you've seen so I've seen stats for sort of they're scattered over the big campaign books, which is a bit dodgy. But the bigger monsters, you just look at it and think that's horrible. It does extra damage on a critical. Oh, by the way, it's a critical on an 18, a 19, or a 20. And then you look at the base damage, and it's like 1d12 for one of the attacks. And it's just, you look at this and you think, oh, sorry, I'm banging on, but it is dangerous.
Yeah, I think they've done a lovely job of on aim as well, I have to say. I think they've done if that's your bag, I think they've done a great job of that game. They really have,
Like I say, it's designed to be theory to the mind, which is good. I like that. And there are lots of options, probably a few too many options. And I think in the 2nd edition, it looks like they're scaling that back a little bit because, I mean, certainly in play, I think you get so excited that it's rare that people use a lot of those combat options anyway, even though, like I say, those little cards were there.
I mean, those combat options, I remember looking at them, you've got them set up in Roll20 so we can see, depending on the stance you're in and so on. And you look at them and you're thinking, well, what like if I do that, what difference is it going to make? Is it really, it's understanding how effective something you might do could be. And I think we saw an example of that yesterday where Rick's character tried to boost, I can't remember what the move was called.
Enhearten comrades. Basically, increase, stop people being weary.
Well, it is potentially, but then you look at it. So if you're successful and you get just a regular success, then anybody who's weary isn't weary for 1 round. So, great success 2 rounds and an extraordinary success 3 rounds. Now that's probably worth it. But 1 round, you're kind of thinking, I'm giving up an attack.
It's a big trade-off.
It's a big trade-off. And so I think when you look at a lot of them and you're kind of going, you know what, I'll just smack the thing with me sword, And
but on the other hand, you want those sort of things because in Enhearten comrades, you can imagine, Aragorn sort of standing up there and waving, and Duran's.
I mean, if everybody's battered, if everybody's weary, then it could well be worth it to give everybody a round where they overcome the weariness.
I think it just goes to show what kind of a fine balance it is when you go into a conflict like that. You really are on the edge all the time. You could go. These little actions could make a massive difference, or you could end you as well.
Yeah.
So there's always that drama in there, which I come out of our games with such a buzz. It's the GM, but it's also the system. Saying all the right things. It's also the system. It's just such a immersive game. I just love it.
It's high up there.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's a combination of the setting and the mechanics all meshing together, and then having some decent GMs at hand.
So we've talked a lot about the rules themselves, and obviously they've got the hope mechanic in there as well. One thing I'd like to see what they do with in 2nd edition is how you gain hope. Because I think at the moment you've got a pile of hope tokens at the start of every session, and you sort of use them, and you've got your own personal hope. I'd rather have something that's more to do with interactions within the party to create hope. So it's more about how you've bolstered other people. So seeing a great view, for example, I really like the idea of that gives you hope as opposed to here's your 4 at the start of the session. Try not to use them all. That would feel more ingrained in the Tolkien approach. Tolkien how I see Tolkien anyway. And the other thing is just about the social interactions as well. Although I think in principle the idea is great. So what happens is you set a tolerance for an individual. So let's say you're talking to Theoden or the Steward of Gondor, or whoever, and they will tolerate for a certain amount of time, and then basically you then roll to introduce yourself and to try and interact with them. And the more they'll only tolerate a certain number of failures. And it's how many successes you get before you fail. In reality, now whether it may be the way I'm running it, you're always absolutely smashing these social interactions because you've got options there with because it's a relatively well constructed play group and you're all experienced role players as well. It's rare you come. In fact, I don't think any time you come out of it where you've just been right out the door. So I think maybe a bit more guidance around how you do that, or something a bit tighter. That would be. Because I think so. When you have those social interactions, it's supposed to be epic, and you're supposed to have the same level of threat. I think that you'd have in a combat situation, but it doesn't seem to be there. Certainly, I don't know how
it's enjoyable. Very enjoyable. I do like that side of things. Hence my nomination for Frankenstein's RPG social interaction. But I do see what you mean. It doesn't feel like. Well, I suppose the situation itself doesn't feel like a combat situation, because we're often talking to leaders and kings and we've got to convince them, and it's a lot of fun. I really enjoy it. How we all dig into our characters, and we're finding bits of narrative to kind of justify using skills and so on. And it's really good fun. But in terms of the threat or the risk, I'm not sure that is there.
I've obviously I haven't been able to play this Rohirrim campaign, and I've not read the scenarios. I get the sense that where the jeopardy is if you fail in these interactions, is in the longer term campaign. So I have sort of read the Darkening of Mirkwood. And I get the sense that if you, there's sort of various factions in that setting which are quite fluid. And if you, I get the sense from that written material that if you perhaps insult someone or fail to impress them, that has quite significant sort of long-term effects in the campaign. Like you can really kind of burn your bridges with certain factions, and you will struggle for allies in the future, or you'll set them off on a path, perhaps sending them into the arms of the shadowy factions that are there. So I think, you might, and perhaps the scenarios you're doing, or I don't know if you're running scenarios from the book, Steve, or are you doing your own?
Yeah.
Right.
I'm running the Oaths of the Riddermark.
Yeah,
basically reading it all the way through. So
well, maybe
Gareth Ryder Hanrahan.
I don't know. Maybe it's the consequences. Maybe you're saying they're not failing often, but if they do, maybe those consequences are immediately apparent, and they sort of feed into the scenarios further down the line.
I think I'm just interested to see how they handle it, whether they change. I know it's one of the things they've talked about.
Yeah.
I don't know what the system's going to be.
There's potential there to develop that area. I found it great. I find it like it really engages you again, involves you in the setting with the characters, and we're all trying to role play to get the win, and it's a really good challenge. I think I enjoy it like I enjoy the combat, and I think so. In some ways, I think they have done a good job with it as it stands. But we haven't failed.
It'd be interesting to see if the free league approach to only roll if you have to, which seems to come through in a lot of the other games, if that sort of ethos will come through into this as well. I think it wouldn't be a bad thing.
I think it transfers also to you asked a question about AIM, Adventures in Middle Earth, and what you could do to improve that. I think if I was to do something with that, it would be similar to Tor, with the inspiration, looking at hope, how you award hope, Tor, and how you award inspiration. In there's probably a bit of room to contextualize that even more, maybe make that more interesting.
I like that. I like that idea. I mean, I think we talked a lot about Tor, and I think as we've gone along, we've talked about how well they measure up. So I think clearly, I think from your perspective, Rick, it sounds as though that Adventure in Middle Earth has got the slight edge on Tor from the one.
I mean, basically,
your view, or they evenly matched.
And it gives you an opportunity to use magic that simply isn't there in the One Ring. Yeah, and and also there's a character class, the Scholar.
So it gives you that breadth.
So squashy in combat, and of course it's 5th ed, so combat's going to be a big thing. That to actually give them something give them something that makes them a bit more survivable in a combat situation as opposed to an interpersonal one. That makes it a lot better. And anyway, it's the 2nd age. No one knows about it. It's my castle, my rules. So,
I think for me, let's say Tor is the One Ring is a brilliant game. I think it achieves a lot of what it sets out to do. Certainly, from someone who's when you play it as a player. So in Graham's fantastic game, I played a dwarf, and I sort of felt that I could the dwarves played differently to halflings or to hobbits, played differently to men as well. So which was great. And I think as the GM as well, I think it feels like there is jeopardy there for the players. So I think, and again, the hope mechanic, I think, and shadow, etc. Some of our characters are sort of edging towards the shadow now. So, and you can see there's a real concern about that coming up. So there's the temptation of easy paths to power. I suppose that the open question is, I mean, do you think, given what you've seen, obviously Graham's run it and I think played it as well. What about the rest of you? Do you think you'd ever run
Depends what the 2nd edition's like, I think. If the 2nd edition is actually properly edited, that's all we want. Yeah. If that's done properly, so we can find the stuff we need to know about, then absolutely.
It's always been there in the back of my mind. I'd like to run it, but it's always felt a little bit overwhelming for my simple mind. And so if this 2nd edition, as Rick says, is well organised, clearly written, gets the concepts across well, streamlined, I'd love to run it, to be honest,
What about other systems that are currently available that you could use to run like a Tolkien or a Middle Earth based game? Just my 2 pence really was, again, thinking about sort of 1st and 2nd age gaming, which again we've said that the power levels of those characters are immense. So we're talking about like Gil-galad and Elrond and all that sort of thing, and others. I can't remember the name of loads of them. I should go and come up with loads. But I think something like Hero Quest would be really good for that, because it's very, very narrative, and you can have extremely powerful characters who do incredible things. I think that could be quite a good shout for that. And I'm tempted to
there's
to put something like that together.
Definitely see that. There's also a Fate attempt. I think I can't remember. Lord of the Fate of the Rings, I think it was called. There's like an SRD or something. It's quite old. I don't think it ever led to anything. But there's a whole load of stuff there on running it with Fate, and I think, or I get the impression that the Fate and Hero Quest kind of have a lot of similarities in terms of how they. A couple of other games I've got in mind that would fit well. There's a game called The Hero's Journey, which is in 2nd edition. So I don't know so much about the 2nd edition, but the 1st edition was aimed at Tolkien-esque kind of adventures, really. In fact, the author of The Hero's Journey is James Spahn, who's also the guy who's doing the starter box for the 2nd edition. So he's doing all the Shire stuff and all the adventures. I believe he's also called the American Hobbit or something like that. Anyway, that comes across in the Hero's Journey, and I think it's there in the 2nd edition as well. The idea of the quest, and
the one that sprung to mind for me, and I think Tor's pretty much got your Hobbit era, Lord of the Rings era pretty much nailed. I wouldn't look for anything beyond that. The Holy Grail, or perhaps should I say the Silmaril or the Silmarils of gaming, would be stuff which would do like 1st age. I can, from what I know of Hero Quest, I can sort of see that the appeal there. If you were doing for something a wee bit crunchier, I would look at something like Pendragon. a variation on Pendragon, because a lot of the once knights are sort of a wee bit more experienced, certainly a lot of they can be roused to sort of really do great deeds, like smacking a dragon down and all the rest of it by their passions. And I think if you look at the Silmarillion, you've got all these inflamed passions going around. Feanor's lust for Silmarils and these
like Feanor,
you've got the various sort of love affairs between Bern and Luthien, and everybody seems inflamed by these sort of lusts and passions in the Silmarillion. So a variation of Pendragon might fit the bill there.
To be honest, I might go for Merp supplements and anything. Just because basically I think Merp it's a lot of fantastic supplements with this kind of game that's attached to it. But for me, the heart of the game is the supplements. So I've just got White Hat today, and I'm wondering I don't know the system, but from what I know about it, I don't know, that might be possible. It's simple enough.
I would wear, definitely. Yeah, I have read it, and I can definitely see that would work. It's a kind of, as a game, it's quite it's a little bit abstract. Although you have classes, the classes only really have a high-level framework, so you can do lots within those frameworks. So I could definitely see White Hack working. Although it does have an OSR feel to it, so low-level characters are quite vulnerable.
No, lots of potential there, isn't there? Really? Okay. Obviously, we're at the time of recording, we're still in the middle. Let's say hopefully the latter third of the current pandemic. So options of virtual tabletop play. I mean, there's quite a lot out there. So obviously we're playing the Oaths of the Riddermark over Roll20, which is pretty good. So there's a little bit of work required to set up some of the dice and bits and pieces, but that works really, really well. So it does a lot of the calculations for you. Foundry has got there's a first edition system on there. Haven't played it yet. But if it behaves the way as a lot of other Foundry modules do, I'm sure it's going to be pretty good. And I think it's been actively developed again at the time of recording. So what are our hopes, plans, thoughts about further exploration of Middle-earth in gaming?
Given a thought to maybe continuing it online, and I bounce you guys are far more adept than I am at adapting. So when I looked at the character sheet on for the One Ring on Roll20, which is the system I'm on, I kind of thought, it doesn't do enough. I thought, and I didn't have the skills to improve upon that, which you clearly do, Steve. So I can see me picking that. I can see me picking it up again, certainly for face to face, and continue it that way. If we end up adapting second edition, and if that was well supported virtually, I'd love to convert the characters, no problem, and maybe revisit it that way. I just love to get going again at some time. Is the bottom line.
I think they'd be crazy not to have a character sheet.
Free League are excellent.
For any new system that comes up, you've got to have.
I can't remember if you all played the Alien game. There's got a great, well supported character sheet on there, but they can't. I'm not on top of this as much as maybe some of you are, but I'm sure this was raised and asked to Free League, and they kind of dodged it. And I think it's a licensing issue. About electronic, an electronic version of
it
what
probably
could be
is
perceived as an electronic version of the game online, and I think that might mean that they might not be able to support it as well as they could otherwise choose to.
It would be unofficial, I think.
So it'd have to be a really well-made sort of fan. Which is not to say somebody won't do that, because there's probably a big enough, passionate enough fan base out there.
I'm running Alien at the moment, running Destroyer of Worlds, and on Foundry, and it is fantastic. It looks like it's got a CRT look to it, so it actually looks like the monitors from the Nostromo, and it's got like a little band that comes down over the screen.
You should take some footage of that. I'd love to see that.
Amazing.
That's amazing.
It's an aside. Happy days.
Well, looking forward to seeing the second edition of Tor, really, and the promise of a Moria supplement, which is definitely Yeah. So that is what I'm. It's just so iconic, isn't it, Moria? It just screams adventure and stuff. So I'm really looking forward to that.
I'm just looking forward to the rest of the Oaths of the Rhythm arc. It's fantastic. It's quite possibly, one of my favourites at the moment. I can't say favourite because I might upset some people. But it's certainly it's up there.
It's up there. Yeah, no, it's great fun. I mean, I think I think that the One Ring second edition, I'm really interested. I've got a lot of confidence, I think, in what it's going to be. It sounds, certainly listening to the interviews, it sounds like they're going to double down on they're making it even more Tolkien-y than they were before, and really sort of embracing that, because obviously people are, in for it because of the huge amount of money they raised on Kickstarter. I think, personally speaking, I'm really enjoying the game as it is now. I think that a sort of a turbocharged, smoother second edition will just make that experience a lot better. And I've got plans for certainly running second edition game based in Arnold, so the fall of Arthedain, in the sort of that sort of setup. Be quite good. Again, nicking stuff that's in the MERP supplements, because those are absolutely brilliant. But most of all, face to face game, I'm really looking forward to if we can all of us get together and do the One Ring road trip. I mean, we planned to do it last year. We were scuppered by this global pandemic, but I think certainly for me and all the sort of
it was a gem,
due to Graham's work. Really, that weekend was certainly stands out for me.
It was just the intensity and the immersion of just being there and just for the whole weekend. Hours on end playing. It was great. Yeah.
So
you were a great bunch of guys to run the game for, and honestly, it's like if you die and go to gamer heaven, it looks a bit like that weekend in my eyes. It was just great.
I saw the photos popping up on Twitter, and a little tear in my eye looking back on those fresh young faces. But we'll be there again, guys. Well, listen, it's been fantastic to ramble around. So we're going to put out our pipes, and we're going to tap them out in the fire of the Green Dragon. We're going to drain the reins of our tankards, and we're going to wander off into the night singing drunkenly. Thanks for that, guys. I'll talk to you all soon.
Thanks for listening to another exploration of my gaming vexes. If you've got any thoughts you'd like to add to what you've heard here, or a gaming vex of your own you'd like to offer up for discussion, you can contact me on Twitter @AllAnthar, or you can leave a voice message. The link's on the podcast webpage on Anchor, or can be found in the show notes. Until the next time, may all your games be free of vexatiousness, and be excellent to each other, always.